back to my channel. So today, as you can see, I am in a new location, so bear with me while some little kinks are worked out here and there. We should be getting some good sit-down backgrounds in a bit, but for now, I'm just filming up in the loft area, which you may have seen in my last video if you watch any of like my vlog, walk around vloggy type stuff. We have this loft area that's also the office. This is currently where I'm filming, so hopefully the audio and lighting isn't too bad, and we will continue to adjust as this place gets set up. But for now, I just wanted to really quickly go over some of last month's book stuff and then talk a little bit about this month and how the reading is going. Last month, as you know, I was doing Vita, and then at the end of April we ended up moving, and I did actually manage to finish one more book, and that is Blitzed. One day when I was browsing Omni, I saw that it was available, and I didn't really expect my library to get a copy of it and not get a copy of it that quickly. So I snatched it up, and I think it may have just been added because like 10 minutes later there was already a hold list. So somehow I managed to grab that ebook of Blitzed, and I just raced through it. There was a lot of information in a very short book. It was only like 200 and something pages. It felt like a very short book for the amount of stuff that it covered. It basically covered the entire Second World War, as well as a lot of the stuff leading up to the Second World War. So Blitzed is about drug use in the Third Reich. It is very good in taking that subject and making it the focus of the book. Now, it's a very short book, I would say, for a history book. It's only 250, maybe 300 pages. And that is because it is so focused. You don't get a lot of background on a lot of the topics that it's discussing. It's kind of taken that you already know what this author is talking about because you have some sort of background with history. Now, that would normally be a problem for me because I'm, like I said, not very good with history. So usually I really prefer there to be quite a lot of backstory and in-depth discussion as to what they're talking about, but I didn't find it necessary here because the plot points that they were talking about were so broad. They weren't talking about very specific things, and any of the names that were brought up were names that I recognized and names that I was already familiar with, and if I wasn't, then I was introduced enough. Because I'm not so super familiar with World War II, I don't know how much of this topic has already been covered in other books, but to me it felt very much like Norman Ohler, who is the author, basically found all of these documents. He did a lot of research, and he basically just pasted together this narrative, which when you read it makes total sense. You look at all of the stuff that he's gathered. There's a lot of clippings from books and from documents that some of the medical professionals in the Third Reich, they were keeping records of. There was a lot of that sort of thing, so it felt very accurate and very genuine, and he has citations everywhere. As like a science-minded person, I usually get kind of frustrated if somebody doesn't tell me where they've gotten their information from because, you know, then you're just throwing it in a book and I can't double check to see what you're saying. So it just, I think, comes from me having more of a scientific background. But he has a ton of citations throughout this book, and I really, really appreciated that, and I definitely checked some of them out, and some of them are just statements saying this was found in a letter, this is the letter, this is where I found the letter. The other thing that I wanted to mention was, I know that there was a little bit of concern going into talking about drug use in the Third Reich as an excuse for why the Nazis did what they did. And I think he handled it very well, because obviously if somebody is on drugs or if somebody is, you know, maybe not fully cognizant of what they're doing, it can come off as, well, I was on drugs, so the blame doesn't really fall on me. He does at one point say that drugs didn't make Hitler insane. They kept him sane long enough to continue doing what his ideas already were. They kept him going longer than he would have if he wasn't on drugs. And he already had these ideas. He already had them before he was all, you know, blitzed out. There are a couple like really interesting facts that I didn't really know about. There's a big section in the beginning where they talk about kind of the relation of drugs being bad in German society and linking them with the Jewish population, and that was really interesting. So I definitely recommend reading it. If you are more of a World War II buff than me and you have heard a lot of this stuff before, I don't know how prevalent this is in other World War II texts. To me, I had never heard a lot of it. None of the conclusions that he goes to are big jumps. They all very clearly lead to one another. So that was really interesting. But that is the last book that I read in April. From there, I picked up like 4, and I wanted to talk really briefly about a couple of them because I got like 80% through both of these. The first one being Uprooted by Naomi Novak. And this book, I've been wanting to read it since it came out. If you haven't heard of it, it is basically a fantasy story where every 10 years, someone called the Dragon, who is like a wizard, comes down from his tower and he takes a 17-year-old girl and then he takes her back to his tower. Stuff happens there that nobody in the village is really sure what it is. So the wizard is protecting the villages from this force that's in the forest. So, I mean, it got a fairly common fantasy plot. There's the wizard, he takes someone, nobody knows why, it's mystical, you know, that sort of thing. But it's a standalone, and it's not very long. Now, I think you probably see my problem with this right now, is that there was no world building, and there was basically nothing to the story. And it got to about the 80% mark, and I was like, okay, I can't get into this story at all because I don't believe the world that this person has created. I don't understand the magic system at all because it's just glossed over. The reason I think that a lot of fantasies are so long is because you need time to build a world for people to be immersed in. You need time to be able to explain a magic system. You need time for somebody to go, okay, what is going on with this character? How is this going to relate, you know, to the overall plot? And for me, the characters were all flat. They had drastic changes in their character makeup. Like the wizard went from being a total dick to like super helpful teacher man in like 2 pages. So I didn't really think that was very realistic or character building at all. The girl, I couldn't really tell what was special about her. So her whole like development as a witch and as somebody with a different magic type was not really covered very well, I don't think. I think this book could have been a really strong trilogy. I mean, this would have been like a 1,000-page epic fantasy. They like took fantasy tropes and then condensed them. So I hit about 80% and I went, I think I'm done with this. As somebody who really enjoys a lot of the magic systems and world building, this one just did not fulfill any of my like normally what I really enjoy about fantasy. I don't know, I really didn't enjoy it. It was a shame because part of it I thought was really interesting, like the fact that she has this different magic that I thought was very interesting, and if they had played with that more and kind of drug that out and figured out how she was learning magic more, if they had done something with that, I think that could have been a really strong story, because that was definitely the most interesting part. I hate getting to that point in a book and then having to stop, but it was kind of a function of we're moving in a week, I need to be doing other things, I can't force myself to get through this, I'm just gonna have to let it go. The next book that I got like 90% of the way through was Bluets by Maggie Nelson. This book I have seen on BookTube. I didn't really know a whole lot about it, but I saw it on Omni again, and you know, Omni is fabulous for that sort of thing. You just grab them and you can try them and forget about them because they'll automatically send them back to the library. Anyway, Bluets is basically Maggie Nelson going through this obsession she has with the color blue. And it started out, to me, very strong and very interesting because I think this is why. Because I had just recently finished The Essex Serpent, and if you've read The Essex Serpent, you know a character in that book becomes a little bit obsessed with the color blue. And I can completely see The Essex Serpent has pulled it was almost like a love story to Bluets by Maggie Nelson in the Essex Serpent, and it was really effectively done. So I'm glad that I've read part of Bluets because it helped me understand that section of the Essex Serpent a lot more. Bluets is very, very short. If you've read something by Maggie Nelson before, you may enjoy this. I have never read anything by Maggie Nelson, so I don't have a connection to this author at all. If you know about Maggie Nelson, if you've read other stuff, you may like really enjoy that a whole lot more than I did. This being like my first introduction to her, I found that I didn't really care very much about why she has this obsession with blue. Second thing, which is a total me thing and is not going to affect a whole lot of other people's enjoyment of the story, is I get weird sometimes about certain words being used. Now, there's only a few words that, like, every once in a while I will, the word is used, it is necessary to be used, that's fine. But when a word is repeated throughout a book, at the end of it I was just like, I'm done hearing that word. I'm done talking about what that is. I'm done with that. And it just makes me feel kind of like, meh, I don't really want to read this anymore. So that was that. That's totally me. That has nothing to do with the writing. I'm sure other people aren't weird like that. So those are the two things that I would say like really drove me away. The other thing that was a little bit weird that I knew going into it is that they're like little snippets. She's like labeled 1 bullet point and written a little snippet about the color blue. And then she's moved on to the next snippet. But sometimes the snippets are connected, sometimes they're completely not connected. There isn't really a break, per se, like a chapter break. They're like bullet points. And I was on like bullet point 300, I think. But the format was starting to get to me because I couldn't really tell. I'm like, well, this one's kind of connected to the last one, but this one is super unconnected. And then she'll go back to another thing. And it makes total sense in like the style that she was going for, but it just didn't work for me. So those are the two books that I DNF'd that I wanted to briefly talk about. It is today, May 22nd, and I have not finished a book yet because obviously when you're moving, all of your shit gets packed up. It's all unpacked now, and I've rearranged my bookcases, so when our downstairs living room is set up, I will be showing you guys how I've decided to rearrange my bookshelves because that's an exciting thing for me. So I hope you guys are having a really good May. The videos are going to pick up from here because now I have time and I have space to be making more videos, and I hope I will see you back here very shortly. Bye.